What if everything you thought you knew about sister wives was wrong? What if the calmest, most reasonable wife, the one fans trusted, admired, and defended for over a decade, wasn't just quietly surviving, but quietly complicit? For years, viewers painted Janelle Brown as the level-headed peacemaker, the balanced wife who stayed out of the chaos. But now the illusion is shattering, and a disturbing truth is coming to the surface. Janelle's silence may have been the very conduit that enabled Kody's control, dysfunction, and favoritism. This isn't merely a narrative about Janelle. It's about how myths are constructed, how silence can equal power, and how complicity goes hiding in plain sight. Today, we debunk the Janelle myth, and once you realize it, you'll never think about sister wives in the same way again. When the Brown family initially went on TLC, each of the wives had their own tag. Mary was the initial wife, proud yet intensely insecure. Christine was the peppy homemaker, attempting to create warmth and harmony. Robin was the outsider-turned-favorite, the human target of constant mistrust. And Janelle? She was the level-headed, logical one. The wife who avoided the drama. Viewers enjoyed that about her. She was smarter, more level-headed, more self-sufficient than the others. She held a job, she handled budgets, she communicated with reason instead of emotion. In contrast to Kody's unpredictable energy and the other wives' meltdowns, Janelle appeared the anchor. She was the stable one who kept the family together. But here's the risk of myths: they blind us. Janelle's serenity wasn't always strength. It was frequently silence. And silence, in a household dominated by imbalance, isn't so much neutrality, it's permission. Each time Kody pushed Mary aside, each time Christine's objections were disregarded, each time Robin climbed higher in authority, Janelle's silence enabled Kody to maintain power. The myth of Janelle as the reasonable wife didn't just protect her, it protected the system. Think back to the moments of crisis in the family. When Mary was shamed for her catfishing affair, the family became cold. Kody disavowed her publicly, speaking ill of her and denying intimacy. Did Janelle jump into action to support her sister wife? No. She provided quiet understanding in the background, but when it was most needed, her voice was heard not. When Christine complained, season after season, of neglect, isolation, and favoritism on the part of Kody toward Robin, Janelle heard her sympathetically, but infrequently stood with Christine in battle. She did not confront Kody's brush-offs. She did not insist on equality. She watched from the sidelines, while Christine bore the burden of resistance. And when Robin joined the family, Kody's affection for her was clear. The disparity unsettled each wife to their core. Christine flat out resented it. Mary wrestled with it. But Janelle? She accommodated. She adjusted. She tolerated Kody's favoritism so long as it didn't challenge her own status. This is the secret truth. Silence is not indifference. Inaction is not nothing. By not challenging Kody's behavior, Janelle permitted it to thrive. And that is complicity. To make sense of Janelle's decisions, you need to examine her survival strategy. Unlike Mary and Christine, who invested their entire lives in the marriage, Janelle always left her foot on the exit. She worked, she established independence. She brought up her children with a measure of practicality. She understood how to be independent, but survival was at a price. In order to preserve her stability, she made the decision not to rock the boat. She steered clear of conflict with Kody whenever she could. She learned how to exist instead of resist. And by doing so, she remained free from the consequence of disobedience. Consider Mary. She stood up to Kody when he rejected her, and she was humiliated for it. Consider Christine. She spoke out against the favoritism, and she was ultimately driven out. Janelle, on the other hand, stayed in Kody's good books for years. Why? Because she knew how to play the game. Fans believed this was wisdom. But in reality, it was complicity masquerading as equanimity. The Janelle myth started to crumble when Christine finally broke free. Christine's exit was explosive, an act of bravery that compelled the world to regard the dysfunction for what it was. Abruptly, fans started to question things. If Christine had the courage to say what needed to be said, why wouldn't Janelle? If Christine was able to leave, why didn't Janelle do the same after all those years? The cameras picked up something different in Janelle, following Christine's departure. For the first time, she spoke out clearly about her frustrations with Kody. She resisted his control obsession, particularly in the disputes during the pandemic. She started taking the side of her children rather than him. The fans applauded, believing that Janelle was finally leaving. But the question remained, where was this fire previously? Why did it take Christine's defiance to provide Janelle with courage? The reality is, silence casts a long shadow. Years of neutrality can't be undone with a few seconds of defiance. And once fans noticed the trend, they couldn't look away. Janelle, quotes enabling doesn't imply she was abusive, manipulative, or cruel like Kody tended to act. It means that she safeguarded herself at the cost of others. Her decision to sidestep conflict made her life easier, but more difficult for Christine, for Mary, and even for the children who witnessed their mothers endured in silence. That's the toughest part of the Janelle myth to take. We wanted to think she was the quiet hero, the level-headed rock. But heroes don't just stand by as others are crushed. Heroes don't look on as a system dismantles their family and do nothing. Her legend was reassuring because it provided a person to believe in. The truth, however, is gloomier. Janelle wasn't so much the eye of the hurricane as she was of the hurricane itself, masquerading as quietness. So, what does this portend for Janelle's legacy? On the other hand, she will forever be remembered as the wife who finally stood up, who preferred independence to Kody's domination, who displayed resilience and strength in the latter pages of the show. The fans continue to admire her independence, her work ethic, and her capability to finally break away. But the myth of her innocence is lost. Her silence, her accommodation, her failure to challenge injustice, all of that belongs to her now as well. The legacy of Janelle is ambiguous. She is not merely a victim. She is not simply a survivor. She is also a perpetrator, one who permitted the dysfunction to succeed by refusing to battle it. And that is the most difficult truth of all. The Janelle myth teaches us that sometimes silence is not peace. Neutrality is not always wisdom. Sometimes the people we trust most, the ones we believe are higher than the fray, are quietly allowing it to persist. The Sister Wives drama is full of drama, betrayal, heartbreak, and survival. But Janelle's story is more painful than any of them. It makes us have to confront tough questions, not just about her but about ourselves. How many times do we remain silent amidst dysfunction? How many times do we sidestep conflict, not knowing that our neutrality empowers injustice to become stronger? How many times do we confuse silence with wisdom, when in fact, it's just a masked fear? The Janelle myth isn't merely about a television family. It's about the danger posed by myths in general. It's about how silence can be the loudest voice in the room. And it's about how complicity masquerades in plain sight, guarded by the fiction of peace. Ultimately, Janelle's legacy will never be uncomplicated. She was complicit and independent, victim and enabler, strong and silent. But whatever else is true, one thing is for sure, the myth is shattered. And once shattered, it can never be remade. Picture this, you've been watching one family for over a decade. Week in, week out, season in, season out, you witness their drama, their victories, their tragedies, and their mayhem. You feel like you know them, like you've lived their lives with them. And if you're a Sister Wives fan, you totally get it. For years, the Brown family has been more than just a TV show. It's been a mirror of dysfunction, resilience, and at times, shocking betrayal. We've seen Kody Brown lose control of the empire he built. We've seen Mary suffer in silence, Christine fight back with fire, and Robin quietly rise to power. But if there's one person fans thought they could trust, one wife who seemed above the chaos, it was always Janelle Brown, the quiet one, the rational one, the level head of the group. The wife who never cried out for attention, who never played games, who never appeared to need Kody's validation like the rest of the others did. She was different, at least so we thought. But here's the bombshell no one could have predicted. Janelle's cool, composed image was more than a personality. It was a facade. Underneath that facade was something far more complex. And when you strip it away, what you find is astounding. Janelle wasn't simply a bystander to the Brown family saga. She was a secret player. A woman whose silence didn't only serve herself but served to maintain Kody's control nicely. This is the shock of nobody's expectation. The Janelle myth, busted. Let quote Set be real. Audiences adored the fantasy. In a household that was on the verge of imploding, Janelle appeared intact. When Christine and Kody fought, Janelle quietly sipped coffee, unruffled. When Mary cried hysterically, Janelle remained composed, logical, aloof. She presented herself as sage, mature, beyond the drama. And that illusion was reassuring. Fans did not want all the wives to be shatters. They wanted someone to cheer for. Someone who could transcend the trivial fights and find sense in the mess. Janelle was that somebody. But here's the risk of illusions. They make us blind to the reality. Because each time Janelle opted for silence over drama, she wasn't just not creating drama, she was letting it occur. Each time Kody was dismissive of Mary in public, each time Christine pleaded for equality, each time Robin was promoted and the rest were marginalized, Janelle's failure to speak out reinforced the dysfunction. The illusion of the peacemaker was powerful. But peacekeepers aren't always heroes. Sometimes they're the ones who hold the door open for dysfunction to walk right in. From the beginning, TLC helped craft the Janelle myth. In those first episodes, when the show was new, and the family was struggling to convince the world that polygamy was possible, Janelle was the ideal poster wife. She was career-driven, money-smart, and independent. She wasn't emotional like Christine. She wasn't attention-seeking like Mary, and she wasn't exotic like Robin. She appeared normal, stable. Audiences were attracted to her in part because she didn't appear to be a stereotype. She appeared to be stability. What nobody caught though, was that stability came at a cost. To maintain that facade, Janelle had to carefully pick and choose her battles. And most times, she didn't fight at all. Consider that, in a household of public arguments and emotional displays, Janelle's silence appeared to be strength. But it was actually complicity masquerading as serenity. So why weren't we fans perceptive enough to notice it earlier? Why were we so oblivious to Janelle's complicity and dysfunction? The reason is easy. Humans adore heroes. In a chaotic tale, we crave someone to look up to. Janelle became that person. As Christine was depicted as the bad girl, Mary as the shattered one, and Robin as the baddie, Janelle emerged as the favorite, the stable hand who held the family together. We defended her endlessly. Janelle's the smart one. Janelle knows how to deal with Kody. Janelle's too mature to get involved in the drama. Those were the stories we told, repeatedly. And here's the kicker. Those stories never came from Janelle herself. They came from what she didn't do. She didn't cry on television. She didn't yell at Kody. She didn't openly fight with the wives. So fans filled in the blanks, thinking her silence was strength. But silence is not always strength. Sometimes silence is survival, and sometimes silence is betrayal. The true shock of Janelle's tale is to see that her silence wasn't so much about keeping peace for herself. It was about preserving the system, even when the system was flawed. When Mary was ostracized, Janelle didn't stand up for her. When Christine wept over years of abandonment, Janelle didn't make her voice ring out. When Robin was given special favor, Janelle didn't speak out against it. Rather, she changed. She adapted. She remained in her lane. And in so doing, she allowed the imbalance to continue unregulated. Think about how different things might have been if Janelle had spoken up. If she had sided openly with Mary or Christine, the weight of her rational, respected voice could have shifted the dynamic. Fans would have rallied behind her. Kody would have been forced to listen. The story of the Browns might have been completely different. But she didn't. And that's the surprise. Janelle wasn't merely quiet. She was in on it. Now, here's where it hurts the most. Viewers felt betrayed. They trusted Janelle, respected her, and held her up as the good wife. To discover that she wasn't merely quietly suffering but quietly supporting was like a gut punch. It's one thing for someone we don't like to make poor decisions. We expect it. But for the one person we love and respect most to be revealed as part of the problem, that is crushing. That is the one thing no one could possibly anticipate. And that's why the Janelle myth is significant. Because it confronts us with an uncomfortable truth. Not about her really, but about ourselves. How many times do we equate silence with wisdom? How many times do we think that the quietest person in the room is also going to be the strongest? How many times do we forget the fact that neutrality very often happens to mean siding with the oppressor? Janelle's tale is not only about this one woman in a polygamous marriage. It's about the peril of the tales we tell ourselves. The jolt of Janelle's complicity is only the start. After you look at the fractures in her legend, you begin to see them everywhere in the way she deferred to Kody, in the way she sidestepped conflict, in the way she allowed others to bear the weight of dissent while she hovered on the periphery. It transforms the way you view every scene, every season, every decision she made. And that is why this revelation is so powerful. It does not simply expose Janelle. It compels us to re-examine the whole sister wives drama. To view it not as a struggle between Kody and the wives, but as a narrative in which silence, neutrality and complicity were just as huge a factor as control and rebellion. Because sometimes the greatest shock of betrayal is not the loud one, it's the quiet one. The one behind the gentle smile, and a cup of coffee. The one people don't see until it's too late. And that's the shock of Janelle Brown. The wife nobody imagined. The myth nobody questioned. Until now, from the outside in, Janelle Brown appeared invincible. Amid the mayhem of the Brown family, tears were shed, voices erupted and feelings burst. Janelle seemed to stand above it all. Viewers thought she was the peace in the tempest, the wife who never played games, the woman who wouldn't get entangled in Kody's never-ending circle of favors and manipulation. But here's the surprising reality. Janelle's placidness wasn't merely placid, it was an artfully crafted deception. A deception so masterful that not only did it play on fans' perceptions, but the whole family played along as well. For years this deception protected her from criticism, generated respect, and granted her authority without anyone noticing. The question is, how did Janelle construct this illusion so flawlessly? And why did no one ever think to challenge it until today? One of Janelle's most powerful weapons in sustaining her image was neutrality. She became a master of sitting in the middle, never too emotional, never too confrontational, never too dramatic. Remember Christine, she was verbal, frequently tearful, not shy about crying or competing for attention. Mary carried her heartbreak in front of her, her isolation pouring over into almost every show. Robin arrived with tears, deceptions and an ongoing aura of mystery that fueled speculation among fans. And then there was Janelle, sitting quietly, nodding, dropping the occasional logical observation but never engaging in conflict. Unlike the others, she felt like a breath of fresh air. Calm, logical, balanced. But neutrality can be risky, because while Janelle wasn't fueling the fire, she wasn't extinguishing it either. Each time she skirted a fight, she let Kody's actions pass without comment. Each time she remained silent, she tacitly sanctioned the inequality within the family. Her neutrality became her shield, and her disguise. Another piece of Janelle's illusion was intelligence. Fans often described her as the smart wife. She worked outside the home. She handled finances. She valued independence. Compared to Christine's domestic focus and Mary's emotional vulnerability, Janelle looked sharp, practical, and self-reliant. This made her seem more empowered than the rest. She wasn't pleading for attention from Kody. She wasn't crying on set. She wasn't entangled in love drama. She was establishing a career, raising her children with self-sufficiency, and looking forward to the future. But practicality doesn't always translate into moral simplicity. Janelle utilized her common sense as a defense mechanism. When things got complicated, she retreated into work, into logic, into not getting involved. This became part of her illusion. Fans saw her as the voice of reason, but reason without courage is just another form of silence. And silence, as we've already seen, is complicity. Here quote S where Janelle's illusion was most convincing. She made silence look like strength. When Mary was publicly shamed by Kody, Janelle's quiet response looked dignified compared to Christine's outrage or Mary's tears. When Christine insisted on equality, Janelle's calm detachment made her appear wise instead of desperate. When Robin became a priority for Kody, Janelle's refusal to complain made her appear independent. Time and time again, fans translated her silence into power. They assumed, Janelle doesn't need Kody like the others. She's stronger, she's smarter. But hold on here. Is silence truly strength when injustice is occurring right before your eyes? Is it strength to see your sister wives be in pain and remain silent? Or is it mere self-preservation? That's the uncomfortable reality behind Janelle's facade. What appeared to be strength was in large part avoidance. What appeared to be independence was at times indifference. Perception is everything, and especially on reality television. And Janelle knew this. Her serenity invested her with power, not because she took control, but but because fans and even family attributed it to her. They thought that silence equaled wisdom. They thought that neutrality equaled fairness. They thought that remoteness equaled being stronger than everyone else. In real life, this attitude served as armor. It prevented her from being criticized as Christine was for being too emotional, or Mary for being too needy, or Robin for being too manipulative. While those wives were trashed, Janelle was shielded, admired, even worshipped. And because she was so reluctant to drop her guard, she didn't give the audience moments of vulnerability that could be manipulated back at her. That way, Janelle wasn't only living her truth, she was curating her image. And it worked perfectly. Perfect illusions always have a price to pay. For Janelle, the price was the burden of complicity. By not confronting Kody's favoritism, she permitted Robin's power to expand unchecked. By not defending Christine publicly, she let her sister wife do all the battle solo. By not standing up for Mary, she isolated her. This is the portion of fans that did not want to witness. Because if Janelle's composure was fake, then it would mean that she was not only the sensible wife, she was also part of the problem. Her silence was not innocent, it was potent, and it had repercussions. So why did the illusion persist so long? Why didn't anyone challenge it? Because we wished to believe it. In a dysfunctional family, we needed someone to look up to, someone to support, someone who appeared sane in the midst of madness. Janelle became that someone. And the reality is, illusions only shatter when someone makes us see up close. It was only after Christine's dramatic exit, only after the fissures in the family became undeniable, that the fans started rereading Janelle's character. Only then did people start questioning, why didn't she stand up? Why didn't she resist? Why did she let this happen for so long? The fantasy worked because it made us comfortable. And nobody likes to shatter their comfort until reality forces them to take notice. With each passing season, the fantasy dissipated. Janelle's annoyance with Kody began seeping through cracks. She spoke about her issues more vocally. She allied with her children in pandemic conflicts. She started questioning Kody's commands, something viewers had never observed in her until then. And that's when the truth was undeniable. If she could now speak out, then she could have spoken out earlier. If she was capable of standing up to Kody in seasons to come, then her previous silence wasn't strength. It was a decision. A decision to remain silent. A decision to guard herself. A decision to hold the illusion. A Perfect Illusion by Janelle's isn't merely a tale of one woman in a polygamous relationship. It's a tale of how perception can blind us, of how silence can be confused for strength, of how neutrality can be used as power. The lesson is easy but effective. Just because someone appears calm doesn't mean they are innocent. Just because someone isn't combatant doesn't mean they don't belong to the struggle. And just because someone stays away from drama doesn't mean they aren't facilitating it. Janelle's deception was flawless. Too flawless. And once you have seen through it, you cannot deceive it. Loyalty. It's the term that had been used to describe Janelle Brown for years on Sister Wives. Fans knew her as the reliable one. The wife who didn't rock the boat. The one who stood firm during the storm. The one who silently held up the family foundation, while the others competed for attention or broke down under pressure. What if this supposed loyalty wasn't as admirable as fans thought? What if Janelle's loyalty, rather than being her greatest strength, was the most sinister aspect of her narrative? Because loyalty, misplaced, can be a jail. And for Janelle, that jail kept her captive for decades. On television, Janelle's loyalty usually appeared to be targeted toward Kody. Regardless of the issue that arose, no matter how poorly he treated the other wives, Janelle seldom criticized him. She may have disagreed in private, but when the cameras were in front of her, her words and gestures said something entirely different. When Mary was shamed publicly after her catfishing fiasco, Janelle didn't rush to defend her. She remained in her safe space. When Christine cried about years of disregard, Janelle sympathized in secret, but did not place her allegiance to Christine before her allegiance to Kody on camera. And when Robin crept up as Kody's favorite, Janelle did not complain. She just adapted, as if devotion to the patriarch trumped equity for the family. This dichotomy, private frustration versus public devotion, would become one of the most characteristic habits of her behavior. The fans thought her devotion was a sign of strength, but the truth was it was a strategy. A survival tactic that kept her on good terms with Kody, even if it meant doing nothing while others got hurt. To understand why Janelle's devotion was so important, you have to view it as part of her survival strategy. Early on, Janelle was the independent wife. She worked, she cared about money, and she wasn't as emotionally attached to Kody as the other women appeared to be. This afforded her a kind of freedom, but put her in a position that no one else was in. Her independence guarded her, but it also meant that she didn't want to lose the stability that she did have. By staying with Kody, at least in public, she guaranteed herself a place in the family dynamics. She wasn't going to get frozen out like Mary, or pushed away like Christine. She instead forged a middle ground, independent enough to get by without Kody's constant presence, but loyal enough so that he never completely turned on her. This balancing act worked for years, but it came with a heavy cost. Her loyalty to Kody meant betrayal to the other wives. Take Mary's catfishing scandal. It was one of the most humiliating storylines in the history of sister wives. Kody publicly rejected her. The family's trust crumbled, and Mary became more isolated than ever. Now imagine if Janelle, the respected rational wife, had spoken up in Mary's defense. Imagine if she had stood beside her sister wife and told Kody, "This isn't fair. She deserves compassion." The power of her voice could have shifted the dynamic. But she didn't. Janelle remained silent, and loyalty to the patriarch was more important than sympathy for Mary. For viewers, it was a lost moment. But for Janelle, it was a strategic decision. Maintaining her position with Kody was more important than standing up for Mary. And that loyalty once more preserved the dysfunctional system. Christine's narrative is likely the most straightforward illustration of Janelle's mixed-up loyalty. Christine was vocal, passionate, and merciless in her pursuit of equality. She insisted Kody treat her with dignity, and when he failed, she finally gave up on him. The fans applauded her courage as the heroine of the show. Where was Janelle though when Christine needed her during her toughest times? Yes, Janelle was Christine's friend. She empathized, she heard her out. But she didn't often stand with her in public wars. When Christine and Kody had conflicts, Janelle stayed neutral. She opted for that, which unbeknownst to her or not, was another brand of loyalty to Kody. The irony is that after Christine finally left, suddenly Janelle found her voice. She began questioning Kody more boldly, even rebelling against him on camera. But timing is what unmasks the truth. As long as Christine was in resistance, Janelle remained faithful to Kody. Not until Christine did it by herself, and left did Janelle feel secure enough to come out of hiding. Robyn's presence in the family is where Janelle's loyalty is most baffling. From the moment Robyn became part of the marriage, Kody's favoritism was obvious. Christine hated it, Mary struggled with it, fans seethed over it, and yet Janelle appeared unbothered. She didn't resent Robyn openly. She didn't complain about the favoritism. She adjusted, subtly redefining her place in the family to fit the changing pecking order. By not struggling against Robyn's ascension, Janelle's devotion to Kody was once again evident. But that selection sent ripples. By not speaking out against the favoritism, she legitimized it. Her silence informed Kody that the favoritism was okay. It informed Robyn that she had nothing to fear from her. And it informed Christine and Mary that they were alone. Thus, Janelle's loyalty was not only to Kody, but to the system itself, even when said system was flawed. So why did fans not see this earlier? Why did they embrace Janelle's loyalty as strength rather than complicity? Because of the myth. The myth that Janelle was the reasonable wife. The one who didn't need drama. The one who could rise above the chaos. That myth blinded viewers to the truth. Her refusal to take sides was itself a side. Her silence was loyalty to Kody. It's easy to overlook, because loyalty can appear noble. It can appear adult. But here, loyalty meant standing with the cause of dysfunction, rather than protecting the victims thereof. The pivot in Janelle's loyalty occurred after Christine left. Instantly, the foundation of the family was rocked. Christine's courage revealed cracks that couldn't be overlooked anymore. And for the first time, Janelle started openly aligning with her kids, rather than Kody. Throughout the pandemic, she butted heads with Kody on his authoritarian rules. She stood up for her sons against his insistence. She started complaining about his favoritism towards Robyn. Fans applauded, thinking she was finally standing up for herself. But it begs the question, why now? Why not years ago, when Mary and Christine needed her? Why did it take Christine's mutiny for Janelle to somehow decide on her loyalty differently? The response is not easy to hear. Janelle's allegiance wasn't right or wrong. It was about security. As long as the system held, she remained loyal to Kody. Only when the system broke down, did she permit herself to change. So, what does this do for Janelle's legacy? It means that her loyalty is a lot more complex than it was thought to be by fans. It wasn't all about devotion to Kody, or to the family even. It was about preserving herself, about holding on to her position in the system while having someone else do the work of resisting. Her loyalty kept her safe, but it also betrayed her sister wives. And that's why she's viewed differently by fans now. Janelle was the loyal wife. All right, but that loyalty had a cost. And it wasn't just paid by her. It was paid by Mary, Christine, and even her own kids. The tale of Janelle's loyalty makes us consider difficult questions. Is loyalty ever necessarily a virtue? Or can it be a disguise for fear at times? Does being loyal make you strong if it requires you to leave others in their suffering? And most significantly, what if loyalty is offered to the wrong individual, or the wrong system? For Janelle Brown, the response is obvious. Her loyalty perhaps seemed great on the surface, yet deep down, it was the adhesive which held a crippled system in place for much longer than it should have endured. And that's the loyalty that no one ever questioned, until now. All great tales have a breaking point. A moment when silence no longer shields. When neutrality ceases to be possible. When years of compromise gather such momentum that they cannot stand the weight of it. For Janelle Brown, that moment did not come in a single explosive argument. It came in a series of cracks. Slow, tiny fissures that spread until her loyalty could no longer contain them. For years she was the calm in the storm, the rational wife, the voice that kept the turmoil of sister wives from spinning totally out of control. But as the seasons progressed, that illusion began to break. And what was left was a woman torn between survival and self-respect. Between saving her children and saving her spot in a system that no longer served. This was the breaking point. The unraveling started during the COVID-19 pandemic. Initially it seemed like another family argument. Kody declared strict protocols for the whole family, no traveling, no outside engagement, no flexibility of safety measures. He demanded total compliance. For Robyn and her children, the rules were manageable. For Mary, who was already isolated, they were just another layer of loneliness. But for Janelle and Christine, whose adult children lived independently, these rules created impossible choices. Janelle's sons, Gabe and Garrison, wanted to live their lives, go to work, see friends. Kody's demand, obey my rules or risk losing me. This was the trial of Janelle's loyalty. Would she stand with Kody and uphold his authority over her adult sons? Or would she support her sons, even if it meant disobeying the patriarch? For the first time in decades, Janelle decided against Kody. On camera, her voice shook with contained fury as she informed him, "You're asking me to make a choice between you and my children, and I won't choose." It was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The moment Janelle's allegiance fractured. But this wasn't about a pandemic. This was of decades of compromise colliding with one irrefutable fact. When pushed to the limit to choose between the man she had sworn allegiance to and the kids she had nurtured, Janelle knew her allegiance needed to change. Somewhat contemporaneously, Christine hit her own breaking point. After years of rejection and abandonment, Christine informed Kody she was finished. Her choice stunned the family, but it did one thing she hadn't anticipated. It took courage from Janelle. For years Janelle had treaded carefully, remaining within the system even when it was painful. But watching Christine leave, unrepentant and more powerful than ever, ignited a flame within her. If Christine could leave and start anew, perhaps Janelle could as well. But Janelle was not Christine. She didn't hunger for confrontation. She didn't seek drama. She cherished peace more than anything. That's what made her moment of change so compelling. It wasn't a fierce eruption. It was a slow and incremental change. A woman slowly recognizing that her survival strategy was no longer effective. Every fight was another crack. When Kody criticized Gabe and Garrison as being disrespected, Janelle stood up for them. When he implied she had failed him by not following his leadership, she resisted. When he resented her independence, she no longer tempered her speech to make him feel like the boss. Viewers gazed in amazement as Janelle, the formerly obedient wife, started standing up to him on television. Her tone became more biting, her patience thinner, and with each confrontation, her devotion to him eroded further. The turning point wasn't simply about taking her children's side. It was about finally getting it that her silence had allowed his favoritism to go on for too long. No turning point would be complete without Robyn being in the story. For years Janelle had endured Kody's favoritism of Robyn and written it off as something she could navigate. But in the pandemic, the favoritism became inevitable. When Janelle and Christine's families were scolded and excluded for not obeying every guideline, Robyn's family made Kody's sanctuary. He spent almost all his time with Robyn, hardly going to Janelle, and when he did go, it was to lecture or scold. The imbalance was no longer subtle. It was overt. And for Janelle, who had always opted for neutrality, this was the last straw. She could no longer feign the playing field was level. She could no longer excuse silence. Her commitment to Kody's system was broken by the fact that the system had never been equitable, and never would be. The most dramatic indication of this juncture arrived in season 17, when Janelle and Kody's tension culminated. In one unforgettable scene, Kody demanded that Janelle enforce his rules and show loyalty to him above all else. Janelle, calm but resolute, finally said what fans had been screaming for years. "You're not going to tell me how to live my life, Kody. And I'm not going to turn my kids away because of your rules." It was an amazing moment. The woman who had long been the silent loyalist now became the voice of revolt. Her tone held the force of years of bottled-up aggravation, and her refusal to retreat was the real breaking point of their marriage. From that confrontation onward, things were never the same. Janelle and Kody's relationship crumbled quickly. Trust was lost, respect was lost, and the pretense of loyalty that once characterized Janelle was shattered. Left was a woman who had prioritized her children, her freedom and her self-respect over the man she once aided without hesitation. For viewers, though, this wasn't a plotline, it was redemption. The Janelle myth was at last coming apart on television. The woman who had appeared to be the unshakable stalwart was now demonstrating that even the strongest loyalty has its limits. But let's not pretend that this moment of revelation was easy for Janelle. She had spent decades on this marriage. She had brought children up under the dictates of a system that expected sacrifice. She had toiled to provide for the family financially, only to see her devotion taken for granted. Putting it all behind her, emotionally, spiritually, or physically, wasn't about turning her back on Kody. It was about confronting the fact that years of devotion hadn't purchased her security, equality, or love. This was the heartbreak concealed beneath her serene facade. And it's why her turning point was so intense. Because it wasn't defiance. It was survival. Janelle's turning point isn't another installment in the saga of sister wives. It's a lesson in the risks of misplaced loyalty. For so long, she had told herself that being neutral, being loyal was the best defense for herself and her family. And ultimately that loyalty imprisoned her. Only when she decided to shatter it was she finally able to taste freedom. And that's the reality of the crisis point. It wasn't only about leaving Kody. It was about leaving behind the illusion of her own devotion. Once, Janelle was the devoted wife. The cool, reliable one who never rebelled against the system. Now she's something else. She's the wife who finally said no. The wife who picked her kids over the patriarch. The wife who understood that loyalty, when given without condition, isn't strength. It's capitulation. Her moment of change destroyed the myth that had defined her for years. And by doing so, it redefined her legacy. Because Janelle Brown will no longer be remembered as simply the loyal wife. She will be remembered as the woman who finally broke free. Every story has a reckoning. After decades of silence, neutrality, and careful loyalty, Janelle Brown's role in the Sister Wives saga could no longer remain hidden. For years, fans saw her as the reasonable wife, the one who avoided drama, who supported the family from the shadows, who stood quietly in the background while Kody's favoritism, Mary's isolation, Christine's heartbreak, and Robyn's ascension played out on center stage. But in the end, the truth was out. Janelle's peaceful neutrality wasn't innocent. Her silence wasn't merely peacekeeping. Her loyalty wasn't merely strength. It was complicity. And when that complicity came out, viewers could never imagine her the same way again. Fans clung to the fantasy of Janelle the innocent bystander for over a decade. Mary had drama, Christine had passion and suffering, Robin had favoritism and crying, Kody had ego and control. But Janelle, she was the one who balanced. The independent one. The hard-working woman who kept her head down and refused to get pulled into the drama. That's what everyone loved about her. Fans admired her for not fighting battles over nothing, for finding her independence, for not letting Kody dictate every aspect of her life. To most, she was the reasonable one, in a family beset by madness. But as the seasons progressed, fissures began to appear in that myth. And what appeared in those fissures was something darker. By not intervening, by holding her tongue in situations where she might have been able to make a difference, Janelle wasn't merely sidestepping conflict, she was abetting it. The most brutal truth about Janelle's complicity is in her silence during Kody's worst actions. When he publicly disrespected Christine, questioning her worth as a wife and a partner, Janelle didn't come to her defense. She comforted Christine in private, yes, but on television she sidestepped confrontation. When he embarrassed Mary by announcing their marriage was over, when technically still legally married to the family, Janelle didn't come to her defense. She remained silent, letting Kody's story take center stage. And when he openly favored Robin and her children over the rest, spending most of his time in her house, and leaving the rest of the family behind, Janelle adapted rather than complaining about the imbalance. This silence was not neutrality. It was a tacit approval. By not standing up against Kody publicly, Janelle gave him strength. Her neutrality was his protection. Her quiet was his allowance. Then there is the matter of money, an aspect of the saga that fans tend to neglect, but one that exposes even more complicity. Janelle was, all reported, the most economically responsible of wives. She held down steady jobs. She invested wisely. She brought in a considerable chunk of money to the family. But rather than using her independence to push against the inequality in the family, she poured it into the system. While Christine struggled with emotional deprivation, while Mary sat the bench, and while Robin had financial support from Kody, Janelle's earnings brought in the bacon. Her loyalty wasn't emotional, it was economic. This only strengthened her complicity, for in the end she didn't merely sit idly by as Kody constructed an imbalanced family structure. She funded it. It wasn't until the later seasons, especially after Christine left, that viewers started looking at Janelle differently. On Twitter and Facebook, conversations changed. Was Janelle actually the reasonable wife? Or was she just too complacent about the system to rock the boat? Some of her fans leaped to her defense, maintaining that she was merely doing what she needed to do in order to survive. Others claimed she had the voice and the platform to bring about actual change, but simply refused to. The controversy unveiled something significant. Janelle was no longer being regarded as the passive hero. Her silence, once interpreted as wisdom, was now being re-evaluated as complicity. The shattering of the Janelle myth came in phases. Christine's strength. When Christine finally left Kody, viewers understood what strength actually meant. Her strength in leaving revealed the disparity. Janelle had faced most of the same issues, but she had not acted. The pandemic fights. When Janelle and Kody fought over their kids, viewers cheered. But they also wondered, why did it take so long? Why did it take her own kids to be threatened before she finally pushed back? The financial divide. The more information that came out about the family's finances, the more it became clear to fans how Janelle kept the system going. She wasn't just getting by. She was one of the supports keeping the whole thing up. These developments each eroded the myth until the complicity could no longer be denied. For fans who had been devoted to Janelle for years, the disclosure of her complicity was upsetting. It was like betrayal. Humans had regarded her as the voice of reason, the model of how to endure dysfunction with dignity. But as the truth came out that her neutrality had helped dysfunction flourish, it made audiences realize an uncomfortable fact. Sometimes the quietest individuals in the room are the most powerful, and sometimes by staying silent, they do the most damage. So what becomes of Janelle's legacy? It means she can't be viewed any longer as merely the loyal wife. Her narrative is more complex, more provocative, more authentic. She wasn't a victim of Kody's favoritism. She was a collaborator in the system that enabled it. Her complicity doesn't eliminate her pain. It doesn't eliminate the neglect she suffered, or the ways in which she was similarly ignored in favor of Robin. But it does mean that she wasn't merely a victim. She was also in some sense an enabler. And that's the painful reality. Janelle's legacy isn't one of absolute loyalty or absolute betrayal. It's both. What can fans take away from this discovery? That complicity isn't always deafening. That it isn't always blatant. Sometimes it's masked by quietness. Sometimes it's masked by neutrality. Sometimes it's masked by the choice to remain, when departure would reveal the truth. Janelle's complicity reminds us that doing nothing is indeed a choice. And when made repeatedly, it can determine the fate of an entire family. Imagine it, the cameras keep rolling, and Janelle remains sitting silently as Kody rages. Robin sobs, Mary shatters. Christine rebels. She doesn't shout. She doesn't bolt. She simply sits, quiet, uncommitted. For years viewers confused that image with strength. But now, with the complicity and secret exposed, it's obvious what it actually was. Silence that supported dysfunction, loyalty that shielded the inappropriate person, neutrality turned into betrayal. And that is the reality fans can never erase. Janelle Brown will forever be an intriguing character in the Sister Wives saga. She wasn't the loudest one in the room, she wasn't the most dramatic, she wasn't the most tearful, but in large part she was the most crucial. Because her complicity, silent behind a veil of tranquil devotion, was the adhesive that kept the family's dysfunctional system intact for 4 decades. Now that the mask has broken, fans are left wondering, who was Janelle actually? The faithful survivor, the quiet enabler, or both? The truth may be painful, but it's the one that counts most. Janelle was never merely a bystander. She was always a part of the narrative, and the complicity she believed was secret. It's now exposed for the world to witness. Each tale has an end, but ends are not typically tidy. They don't come with a solitary door closing or a flourish of black. Ends are messy, complicated, full of contradictions and open-ended questions. And in Janelle Brown's case, the fallout from her turning point, and the discovery of her culpability, had fans, family, and even Janelle herself grappling with one haunting question. Who is Janelle Brown, really? She was the loyal wife for decades. Then she became the secret enabler. Then the reluctant rebel. And lastly, the woman on the precipice of reinvention. Section 6 isn't about the past. It's about the aftermath. It's about what occurs when the myth has been broken, and all that remains is the unvarnished truth. Christine quote. Seth's departure was the first domino. Janelle's rebellion was the second. And together they sent shockwaves through the Brown family that can never be undone. Mary, who had lived in loneliness for years, suddenly found herself no longer the only outcast. Christine had left, Janelle had turned, and Mary's own quiet suffering was now seen in a new light. Fans began asking, was Mary's pain overlooked because Janelle chose to stay loyal for so long? Robin, the favorite wife, was the target of fan anger. Now that Janelle's complicity was revealed, Robin's actions seemed even harsher. She hadn't merely been favored, she'd been shielded by the code of others. And now that code was broken. And then there was Kody. Once the patriarch, once the fulcrum, now he was alone with but one wife remaining by his side. The man who had demanded fidelity had at last learned what occurs when fidelity is shown for what it is. Thin, tenuous, and temporary. For Janelle, though, the fallout was more complicated. On the one hand, she gained new courage. She prioritized her children over Kody. She asserted herself on camera. And she finally shattered the chains of silence that had held her hostage for years. Viewers who once labeled her complicit now cheered for her bravery. Memes, tweets, and whole Reddit threads crowned her the unexpected rebel. But on the other hand, the complicity questions didn't go away. They hung around. Critics questioned, why did it take so long? Why didn't she stand by Christine earlier? Why didn't she come to the defense of Mary at her lowest points? This split became Janelle's new persona, half iconic, half stigmatized. She was no longer merely the loyal wife. She was now the woman who exists in the space between survival and silence, courage and complicity. Most effective in Janelle's aftermath was the character of her children. Gabe and Garrison were the unlikeliest heroes of her tale. They refused to cave in to Kody's strictures, pushing Janelle to stand up for herself. In a sense, they were the ones who pushed her to her limit. Without them, would Janelle ever have disobeyed Kody at all? Savannah, quieter and more reserved, mirrored the emotional toll of sharing a split home.
Fans wondered just how much Janelle's silence had dictated her younger children's lives. Her older children, some of whom already had established lives of autonomy, were living proof that Janelle's biggest allegiance had always been to them, even when she didn't so much as admit it on television. The kids recontextualized Janelle's narrative. She wasn't only the dutiful wife, she was also the mother-in-law protective of her children, struggling to reconcile a husband's need for control with her children's desire for liberty. And when the decision at last became irrevocable, she chose them. The aftermath played out as well in the court of public opinion. Online fans analyzed each episode, each nonverbal signal, each word Janelle said. Some applauded her for finally speaking out. Others criticized her for taking so long. Whole YouTube channels and podcasts argued over her complicity versus her bravery. The story had changed, no longer the most respected wife. Janelle was now the most contentious. She wasn't the outspoken like Christine, or the melodramatic like Mary, or manipulative like fans vilified Robin for being. She was more difficult to categorize, because her tale was one of opposites. And that incongruity is what made her aftermath so interesting. For the first time in her adulthood, Janelle was finally free. Free from obligation to appease Kody. Free from the duty of keeping up appearances with neutrality being peaceful. Free from stress of maintaining a broken family. But freedom isn't easy. Along with freedom was the haunting awareness of what she had lost. Decades of her life had been spent toiling for a system that repaid her fidelity with disregard. She had put in her money, her time, her silence, and she had gotten back inequality, solitude, and shattered trust. This awakening was painful, yet it was also freeing. Because once she realized it, she could never turn back. The fallout from Janelle's moment of reckoning makes us wonder, how will she be remembered? Will she be remembered as the devoted wife who grounded the family for decades? Or as the quiet enabler who let Kody's favoritism and abandonment go unchecked? Or maybe as the long later blooming rebel who finally broke loose and picked her children over the patriarch? She is all three. And that's why the story is powerful. Because unlike the simple narratives of Christine's bravery, Mary's heartbreak, or Robin's favoritism, Janelle's legacy is complex. It forces fans to wrestle with uncomfortable truths about silence, survival, and complicity. In the aftermath, Janelle's story became more than just reality TV drama. It became a mirror for viewers. How many people stay silent in their own lives because speaking up feels too dangerous? How many allow bad systems at work, at home, and relationships because confrontation feels riskier than neutrality? How many mix up loyalty and survival, not understanding that silence can be betrayal in itself? Janelle's wake isn't simply about sister wives or polygamy. It's about the human risk of complicity in things that are not spoken, but also the strength of finally leaving it behind. So where does Janelle go from here? That's the unknown portion. The cameras caught her moment of change, her collusion, and her defiance. But the rest of the story is still being dictated by her relationships with her children, by her self-reliance, and by how fans decide to recall her. One thing for sure, the Janelle myth is over. The days of viewing her as the placid devoted wife who shunned drama are in the past. Now she is something more nuanced, more human, and ultimately more real. And perhaps that's the most potent finale of all. Because ultimately, Janelle Brown's tale isn't one of perfection. It's one of contradiction. It's one of loyalty and betrayal, silence and defiance, complicity and courage, all tangled together in one woman who believed she could endure in the shadows, only to learn that silence comes with a price tag. That price is finally revealed, and the world is watching what she does next.